The dust rose behind the truck in a pale brown cloud as it crawled up the long gravel drive. Each stone crunching under the tires like a warning Emily felt deep in her chest. She watched the landscape through the window, trying to memorize it in case she never saw it again. Endless land stretched in every direction, broken only by wooden fences, a lone windmill creaking in the distance, and the farmhouse ahead solid, quiet, and intimidating in its stillness. This place did not look like it had room for mistakes, or for people who didn't belong. When the truck stopped, no one spoke right away. The engine clicked as it cooled, and the silence felt heavier than the long flight that had brought her here. Emily's fingers tightened around the strap of her small bag. Everything she owned was inside it. Clothes folded too neatly, documents she had checked 100 times, and a few photos from a life that already felt unreal. She stepped down from the truck, her boots sinking slightly into the dry earth. The air smelled different, dust, grass, something warm and raw. It wasn't bad, just unfamiliar. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that made the farmhouse look larger than it probably was. She wondered how many people had stood here before her, wondering if they were about to stay or leave. Jack stood a few steps away, hat in his hands, his posture stiff like he wasn't sure what to do with himself. He was taller than she expected, broader too, with the kind of face shaped by years of sun and wind. His eyes flicked toward her, then away again as if he didn't want to stare. He looked like a man used to animals more than people, and certainly not used to moments like this. "Long trip," he said finally, his voice low and careful. Emily nodded. Words felt stuck somewhere between her throat and her heart. She followed him toward the house, each step echoing in her mind. The porch boards creaked as they climbed, and she noticed how he slowed his pace without saying anything, as if afraid she might not keep up. Inside, the farmhouse was cool and dim, the thick walls holding back the heat. It smelled faintly of coffee and wood polish. Everything was tidy, almost too tidy, like a place kept ready for guests who never came. A pair of small boots sat near the door. Emily noticed them immediately, her chest tightening. A child. She had known, of course. She'd read the messages, seen the photos, but seeing proof made it real in a way nothing else had. Jack cleared his throat. "You can put your bag there," he said, gesturing to a chair. Emily set it down carefully, like it might break if she wasn't gentle. She stood there, hands clasped in front of her, unsure where to look. Her eyes moved over the room, the worn dining table, a framed photo of Jack with a woman whose smile seemed frozen in time, another of a little boy missing his front teeth. A soft sound came from the hallway. Emily turned just as a small face peeked around the corner. The boy's eyes were wide and curious, his fingers gripping the edge of the wall. He didn't say anything, just stared at her like she was something new and slightly dangerous. "This is Noah," Jack said quietly. Emily smiled, slow and careful. "Hello," she said, her accent slipping out despite her efforts to hide it. Noah nodded once, then disappeared back into the hallway, his footsteps quick and light. Emily felt suddenly exposed, like she'd already been judged by the most important person in the house. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "He's shy." "I understand," Emily replied. She understood more than he knew. They moved into the kitchen, and Jack poured 2 glasses of water, setting one in front of her. His hands were rough, scarred, steady, a man who knew what he was doing when the world made sense, and who seemed lost now that it didn't. Emily took a sip, buying herself time. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. This was the moment she had rehearsed on planes and airports and sleepless nights. The moment where she would decide whether to pretend everything was fine or admit the truth. She set the glass down. "Jack," she began, her voice trembling despite her effort to keep it steady. "I want to be honest." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers fully for the first time. "Okay." She took a breath, then another. If this isn't right, you can send me back." The words fell into the space between them and stayed there. Emily felt exposed, like she had opened a door she couldn't close. She waited for his reaction, bracing herself for disappointment, for relief, for anything that would confirm her fear that she didn't belong here. Jack didn't speak. He stared at the table, his jaw tightening slightly. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Emily's thoughts raced. Maybe he was angry. Maybe he regretted this arrangement as much as she did. Maybe he was already calculating the cost of undoing everything. "I know this was supposed to be simple," she continued, unable to stop herself. "I know we agreed on things. But I don't want to be a problem. I don't want to force myself into a life that doesn't want me. Her hands shook now and she clasped them together to hide it. Memories flooded her mind. The small apartment she'd left behind. The promises she'd made to herself. The quiet hope that this place could be different. That she could be different. Jack finally looked up. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't cold either. It was something harder to read. Thoughtful, conflicted, heavy with responsibility. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Emily felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry. Not here, not now. I can pack, she added softly. I don't want to cause trouble. Somewhere down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Emily didn't turn, but she felt the presence of small footsteps. The quiet listening of a child who understood more than adults often gave him credit for. The farmhouse seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Jack's answer, waiting to decide whether Emily would stay or disappear like a passing shadow across the land. The creak in the hallway grew louder, and before Emily could gather the courage to look, Noah appeared again, standing just inside the kitchen doorway. He didn't hide this time. His small hands were balled into loose fists at his sides, and his eyes moved between Emily and his father, sensing the weight in the room even if he didn't fully understand it. Children were like that, Emily thought. They felt the truth before anyone spoke it. Jack noticed him too. His shoulders dropped slightly, as if the presence of his son grounded him. He knelt down, resting one knee on the floor so he was at Noah's level, and placed a gentle hand on the boy's back. Hey, buddy, Jack said softly. Everything okay? Noah nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again, unsure how to answer. His gaze flicked to Emily, then away. Is she leaving? He asked, his voice small but clear. The question struck Emily harder than anything else. Her chest tightened and she swallowed hard, staring at the worn grain of the kitchen table. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. Not just rejection, but hurting someone who hadn't asked for any of this. Jack took a slow breath. No one's going anywhere right now, he said carefully. Noah frowned. But she said send her back. Emily flinched. She hadn't realized he was listening. Of course he was. Jack stood up slowly as if every movement mattered. He looked at Emily then, really looked at her, not as a contract or an arrangement, but as a person standing on the edge of a life she wasn't sure she was allowed to want. My son already chose you, he said at last. The words were simple, but they landed with a quiet force that stole Emily's breath. She lifted her head, eyes wide, unsure she had heard correctly. Noah stepped forward, emboldened now. He reached out and tugged lightly at the hem of Emily's sweater. You're nice, he said. You didn't get mad when I spilled the milk. And you make pancakes with the little crispy parts. Emily let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob she couldn't stop. She covered her mouth, tears slipping free despite her best efforts. No one had ever said something like that about her before. Not like this, not in a way that mattered so deeply. Jack watched her for a moment, then spoke again, his voice steadier now, like he had made a decision he'd been circling for a long time. This ranch has been quiet since my wife passed, he said. Too quiet. I thought bringing someone here would fix things, make it easier. But I don't want you to feel like you're filling a space that isn't yours. Emily shook her head, tears blurring her vision. I don't need perfect, she whispered. I just don't want to feel unwanted. Jack nodded slowly, understanding settling into his expression. I don't want that either, he said. For you or for Noah? He glanced at his son, who was now standing close to Emily, leaning slightly against her leg as if testing whether it was allowed. Jack smiled faintly at the sight, a smile that hadn't come easily in a long time. We can take this one day at a time, he continued. No promises we can't keep. No pretending this is something it's not. If you stay, it's because you choose to, not because you owe us anything. Emily wiped her cheeks, her hands trembling. She looked down at Noah, then back at Jack. For the first time since she arrived, the fear loosened its grip on her heart. There was still uncertainty, still risk, but there was also choice. I'd like to stay, she said quietly. If that's okay. Noah grinned, a wide, gap-toothed smile that felt like a small miracle. Can we have pancakes tomorrow too? He asked. Emily laughed through her tears. Yes, she said. We can have pancakes. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He walked to the window and looked out over the land, the late afternoon sun turning the fields gold. For the first time in years, The ranch didn't feel like a monument to what he had lost. It felt like something still growing. He turned back to them. "Supper will be ready soon," he said, his tone lighter. "We usually eat early." "That's fine," Emily replied. Ordinary words, but they carried a new weight now. A sense of belonging she hadn't expected to find so quickly. As they moved around the kitchen together, the house filled with small sounds, cups being set down, footsteps crossing the floor, Noah's quiet humming. The silence that had once felt oppressive now felt peaceful, like the pause between breaths. Outside, the wind rustled through the tall grass, carrying away the last of Emily's fear. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she wasn't afraid to find out.